me your dreams.
Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back to another Genshin Impact video, and today I'm just going to be doing a quick guide for main DPS Lynettes. That's basically it. If you like the content, leave a like and subscribe. So the pros of a main DPS Lynettes is that she ascends with anemo damage bonus, so she is going to be dealing some pretty decent damage. Her burst is also just really great. Even if you're not using her as a main DPS, her burst has some pretty good utilities. It can taunt enemies, it's off field, and whenever it infuses with an element, it'll basically shoot vivid shots at enemies with that specific element. And Lynettes also looks pretty flashy in her attack animations. The cons of a main DPS Lynettes is she does need to be C6 in order to be a main DPS, because at C6 she basically gets the anemo infusion whenever she uses her elemental skill. Since Lynettes does ascend with the anemo damage bonus, she does need that C6 in order to make full use of a main DPS. And there are other 4-star characters that don't require C6 in order to be a main DPS, like Ningguang, she only needs C1. Yanfei C2, Rosaria C1. However, since Lynettes is a 4-star character, it's going to be a lot easier to C6 her compared to a 5-star. Since Lynettes is a 4-star, she's not going to be out damaging a Scaramouche or a Zhao, since she is going to have 4-star stats. There is a reason why there's not that many showcases of a 4-star main DPS beating an Abyss. That is because 5-stars are just generally better. But even so, you could still clear content with a 4-star main DPS. It's just that 5-stars are just better since they have better stats, and not to mention some people spend for them, so they kind of feel obligated to use the 5-stars. Anyways, the talent priority for Lynettes, regardless of how you're using her, should be her burst, skill, and normal attacks. As I stated earlier, her elemental burst is really good. It deals anemo damage to surrounding enemies, and it can also taunt them. And whenever the Boggle Box, the thing that that Lynettes summons on her burst, whenever it comes in contact with an element, it'll basically fire vivid shots at an enemy with that corresponding element. You can only absorb one element. The Boggle Cat box can be moved by enemies, but it cannot be destroyed, so it is going to stay there for the duration of its time, for the 12 seconds. Because of the versatility of this burst, she can be used in many different teams, just how an anemo character should be. Lynettes' elemental skill has two ways to use it. You can either tap it or hold it. If you tap it, she'll basically just thrust at the enemy and deal anemo damage. And if you hold it, she basically enters this dash mode. And during this dash mode, she can mark up to one single enemy, and once you let go of the skill, it'll basically teleport towards that marked enemy and deal anemo damage towards that enemy. If your Lynettes is C6, she will infuse herself with anemo, and this is basically where your normal attacks will shine. If you don't have Lynettes at C6, there's really no reason to level up her normal attacks, because you're basically just going to be using her for a burst and dip out. So you should only level up her normal attacks if you have her at C6. I know I've been talking about that C6 a lot, but let's talk about what her other constellations do real quick. At C1, after Lynettes uses her elemental skill, it'll create a vortex that'll pull enemies in, which is pretty good for crowd control, since anemo characters typically do that. At C2, her elemental burst can fire an additional vivid shot, so that's more vivid shots for your elemental burst, so more elemental burst damage. At C4, her elemental skill will get an additional charge, so you'll be able to use it twice in a row. This will help her generate even more anemo particles. We'll also be able to group enemies a little bit more often, and if you have her at C6, the anemo infusion will be extended. We already know what her C6 does since I've been sucking it off this whole video. As for artifact sets, there are different combinations that you can use. You can use the 4-piece Viridescent Venerer, which is a pretty good set for general use. It boosts her swirl damage since she is an anemo damage dealer. It will also boost the elemental damage of your other party members. The 4-piece emblem set is also another good option since it does provide her with ER, so she'll be able to use her elemental burst more frequently since it's so fucking good, and it'll also increase the damage of her elemental burst. There's also the new artifact set, the 4-piece Marichas Hunter. Since Lynettes does drain her own HP from her elemental skill, which I forgot to mention, this artifact set will boost the damage of her normal attack, and it'll also give her free crit rate. There's also the 4-piece Desert Pavilion, which is a pretty good set for any anemo main DPS. 4-piece Noblesse Oblige will also work pretty well with her, since it'll also increase her burst damage and it'll also increase the damage of her teammates. If you want to use Lynette in Hyper Bloom teams, there are artifact sets that are pretty good in Hyper Bloom. There is the 4-piece Gilded Dreams, which is basically like the go-to set for, you know, any Hyper Bloom team. There's also the Flower of Paradise Lost, the 4-piece set, which is probably the best option for Hyper Bloom teams. Or you could just run any 2-piece EM set. As for the main stats, if you want to prioritize your animo damage, you're going to want attack, animo damage bonus, and crit rate or crit damage. But for Hyper Bloom, you just want to go full EM. As for the best weapons for Lynette, we got the Favonius Sword, provides her with ER. With ER, she'll be able to use her burst more often. Freedom Sworn is also another good option, since it does provide a team-wide attack buff, and it's also a good choice for transformative reaction damage. If you don't know what that is, I don't know, it's kind of hard to describe. It's basically elemental reactions that deal their own damage instead of the attacks that trigger them. There's also that new free-to-play weapon in Fontaine. I'm just going to call it the Ferryman. Ferryman provides a pretty good skill damage bonus, which is pretty good for Lynette. And it also provides ER, and it can also be pretty good for Hyper Bloom teams. Skyward Blade is also a pretty good option, since it does provide her with ER, and it also has some pretty decent passives with it. Since Lynette is a main DPS, you can basically put any main DPS weapon on her. Any weapon with crit rate or crit damage with the stat stick will work just fine on a main DPS Lynette. Now, as for Lynette's best teams as a main DPS, I think there are only 2 options. You can either run her in a Hyper Bloom team, or you can run her with triple animo with Bennett. With Hyper Bloom, obviously, you're going to want a Dendro, a Hydro, and an Electro character. With Dendro characters, we got Nahida, who's probably the best option, since she provides Elemental Mastery on her burst, and she can also provide Dendro application. You can also run Dendro Traveler instead, since Dendro Traveler is free. As for Hydro, any Hydro character that can apply Hydro off field would work just fine, like Xingqiu, Yelan, Kokomi, Barbara, who is free. As for Electro characters, I think the best Electro character for Hyper Bloom is going to be Kuki Shinobu. As for the triple animo team with Bennett, for the other 2 animo characters, there is Faruzan, who's a pretty good animo buffer, especially at C6, because I think at C6 she provides crit damage for animo characters, I think. And for the last slot, who is going to be animo, it's most likely going to be Kazuha, since he's a pretty good crowd controller. I unfortunately can't really make use out of this team because my Bennett is C6, so his C6 basically fucks over Lynette's animo infusion. Anyways, that's gonna be the end of this Lynette main DPS guide. Let me know what you guys think. Any questions, concerns, let me know in the comments. I basically read and respond to most comments. I'll see you guys later.
Bye bye now. Come again soon.